Colonel Bose, you're known far and wide as a regional authority on the life of Jesus Christ.
You see, now it is accepted that Jesus did not die on the cross. He was saved.
Well, it's not accepted in the Christian world yet.
Christian world, yes. But even among Christians, there are a lot of people who are more open-minded.
Do you think that Jesus was born an avatar?
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah. There's no doubt on that point.
Now, why was your father granted such wonderful accommodations? I don't mean in the luxury nature of them, but their proximity to Sai Baba.
Swami sent for him, He volunteered to come and serve Swami, having been an engineer, on the advice of the West Bengal state president, and he came over and Swami gave him the job of constructing this Sarvadharma Stupa. Father and mother were living in the building where Swami used to live in Vrindavan. In fact, it was a very small room where Ishwaramma used to stay earlier. There was a connecting door to the interview room. So father was permitted, and he used to open the door, and he and I used to sleep in the interview room.
Baba brought your father back to life.
On the morning of Dasara, 1988, 20th October, there was remission of fever. And against mother's advice, he said, no, I must go to the Purnachandra Hall and listen to Swami's discourse and get that Shanti Jal. And during that time, father toppled down from the chair. The Sevadal immediately laid him out, and two doctors, Dr. Chari and Dr. Patel, sitting behind him, immediately came over, and they found no heartbeat, no pulse. Swami in the meantime had switched off the mic and was rushing towards father. He pushed the two doctors aside and appeared to catch something from the air and gave a pat on father's back of the head. Swami said, get up. So he got up. He said, and there was large clapping from everywhere, those who had seen what was happening. So he said, what's wrong? He said, you don't know what happened to you? He said, I fainted. He said, fainted my foot, you died.
No pulse, no heartbeat, two doctors at his side.
He said, you died. We found no trace of life in you.
Does this man ever have stories to share?
Yeah.
See page 273.
See what?
273 page.
What's it say on page 273?
That is about where he says Avalokiteshvara.
Oh, that's where you're talking. You've got that committed to memory, the page reference?
Colonel Samir Kumar Bose. He's the director curator of the Chaitanya Jyoti Museum, an institutional gem in the very heart of Sai Baba's spiritual ashram in Puttaparthi, India. Welcome to Souljourns. This interview was recorded in India in January 2013.
Colonel Bose, it's a joy to be able to speak with you. You just said off camera to Jyoti and me as we were setting up the camera, once you've arrived at the peak, what's the purpose in going out of India to other countries, to other sites, to other places to visit?
It's true. Because people from all over the world come here, and having had the good fortune of coming here on Swami's orders, what else is there to reach? You have reached the pinnacle.
Well, let's start with the beginning. Before getting to the pinnacle, Colonel Bose, when did you first discover that you had an interest in spiritual pursuit, let's say?
Well, it was in the family all along. We were brought up in that way. Father and mother had spiritual leanings, and father had the initiation, and everybody in our family, from a very renowned saint called Balananda Brahmachari, who was in a place called Devghar in Bihar, very well-known saint. So in the family, spirituality was something which was a part of our life. And father became interested in Swami when he was director of Indian Institute of Technology in a place called Kharagpur.
And approximately what year was this?
This was 1974.
Okay. So you were a young man.
Yes, I was also in the army at that time, and father got interested, and they gave him some books to read. He became interested, started attending bhajans. My mother and father both started attending bhajans, and when we went on leave, I didn't go for bhajans, but my little daughter at that time, she used to go to bhajans. And later on, as father became closer to Swami and narrated all experiences, and we read more about Swami, we also became devotees. Myself, my sister, my brother, and then our children also followed.
Did you do it voluntarily, or were you dragged kicking and screaming?
No. Father never forced anybody. He got interested, he started hearing about him, talking about him. So we became interested on our own. I mean, the father never told us.
Can you remember some of your first encounters with Sai Baba?
The first time I came here was 77 January.
Okay.
In Vrindavan. And I had a lot of trouble. People created trouble for me when I was totally innocent. And I came there, father said, come here and meet Swami. So I came across, came over, and father and mother were living in the building where Swami used to live in Vrindavan. In fact, it was a very small room where Ishwarama used to stay earlier.
Oh.
So the kitchen and the bathroom was the same place. When you are
the kitchen
having
and the bathroom.
bath, you couldn't cook anything. You were cooking anything, you couldn't have bath.
So when you said small, you mean very small.
Very small.
And Baba's mother lived there from time to time.
Yeah. And there was only one cot. So mother used to sleep on the cot, father used to sleep on the floor. So when we went in, there was a connecting door to the interview room. So father was permitted, and he used to open the door, and he and I used to sleep in the interview room.
Now, why was your father granted such wonderful accommodations? I don't mean in the luxury nature of them, but their proximity to Sai Baba.
So Swami sent for him. He volunteered to come and serve Swami, having been an engineer, on the advice of the West Bengal state president, and he came over, and Swami gave him the job of constructing this Sarvadharma Stupa. That is November 1975.
So he was the one in charge of that project, which has some legendary stories.
There are stories where the arches had been made with earth, because either you could have carpenters making the formwork and then putting concrete on it, or the other thing was, with no carpenters and planks available, what father decided was to make mounds of earth and then shape it like arches, and then they would pour the concrete on top and the earth would remain.
So they weren't solid concrete.
So concrete was to be poured on it.
Okay.
This earth mound, shaped in the shape of the arches, was to serve as formwork.
I see.
So formwork you remove. Now this earth which was there, it remained there. It doesn't matter. And the night that they finished making that mound, that night, late night, it rained heavily.
So it hadn't dried yet, correct?
No, they had just put it. They hadn't even shaped it. They just put the earth by ladies and gents Sevadal, bringing earth from some place far away.
And then what happened?
And when it rained hard, and father woke up, and then he said, my God, all that work will be now gone, and they'll have to start all over again. And the problem would increase, because the earth would be all wet and spread all over. So he didn't go out in the morning, and he was sitting. Somebody came and said, Swami will be coming now, or Swami is calling you. Something like that. So he went hurriedly. Swami was not there, but to his surprise, he found the mound of earth exactly the same as they had left previous night.
As if there
nothing had been touched.
As if there were canvases or something covering.
As if somebody was holding an umbrella on top of it. And the Sevadal also came, and they were all struck with wonder. How is it that nothing happened to this? And there was very heavy rainfall. So they were all wondering, and how did this happen? Then Father said, well, Swami will be coming soon now, let's get to work. So work started, and then Swami quietly came at the back and said, so Bose, he turned around, so you didn't sleep last night, isn't it? I said, no, Swami, I have seen a wonderful experience of your glory. Then he said, work done by devotees with devotion will never be harmed. Very wonderful words.
So the whole project was saved because of the devotion from their hearts.
Yes. And that day they finished shaping the arches. The mound was shaped to the arches. And that evening, at about 5 o'clock, Swami came again and said, tonight, cover it with canvas. The previous night, he did the holding of the umbrella. This time he said, cover it. And Father took the hint and he ran around, got hold of whatever canvases he could find and covered it very well. And that night it rained equally hard.
Oh.
But he had been warned, so nothing happened to the mound. They finished it.
How many miracles must you have seen as a devotee of Sai Baba? And Jyoti was finding me a photograph of Sai Baba, and I think it's your parents, correct?
Oh, yes.
And it leads me, I mean, it's a little out of order the way I wanted to talk up with you today, but hold that steady now. Jyoti, hold it very steady from afar, just like that. Because there's the world famous story that I want to hear right from the lips of the son of the man who died in the middle of the Purnachandra Hall with maybe 18, 20,000 people. And here, this is the closest I can get before it goes blurry. And in the case that everybody knows who hasn't heard the story before, who has heard the story before, Baba brought your father back to life. So go ahead and tell us from your recollection the wonderful points of that story.
Well, Father had been working very hard on making a concrete apron around the new mandir, that is the mandir here.
The one that was built in 1950.
People used to sit on the sand before that, and Swami said, no, put concrete, cover it with concrete, and that was done. And he was working the whole day, and then he fell ill. He had high temperature after that. And after a week, on the morning of Dasara, 1988, 20th October, there was remission of fever. And against mother's advice, he said, no, I must go to the Purnachandra Hall and listen to Swami's discourse and get that Shanti Jal. I can't miss that. So he went, and this time, for the first time, he sat on a chair. Otherwise, he used to always sit on the ground. Sat on the chair, and Swami started his discourse with a Telugu poem. And during that time, Father toppled down from the chair. The Sevadal immediately laid him out, and two doctors, Dr. Chari and Dr. Patel, sitting behind him, immediately came over, and they found no heartbeat, no pulse. Swami, in the meantime, had switched off the mic and was rushing towards Father. Nobody had seen Swami rush so fast, and he was not running, but he was moving very fast. He pushed the two doctors aside and appeared to catch something from the air and gave a pat on Father's back of the head. Father opened his eyes. He found Swami's feet near his face, and his first action was to try to touch Swami's feet. And Swami said, get up. So he got up. He said, and there was large clapping from everywhere, those who had seen what was happening. And Swami said, go and sit on the steps, you'll get fresh breeze. So he went and sat on the steps, and Swami came back and switched on the mic, continued with his discourse as if nothing has happened. Now my mother and sister, they heard clapping. They saw Swami go somewhere. They heard clapping, they saw him come back. So he said, whatever had happened must be something good, otherwise why should people clap?
They were on the ladies' side.
Ladies' side, they didn't see what was happening. So after the discourse, and Father was walking back to the room, and these two doctors were also following him. So he thought probably they were going somewhere on the same route. Father opened the door of the room and went inside, and the two doctors also followed. So he says, what's wrong? He said, you don't know what happened to you? He said, I fainted. He said, fainted my foot, you died.
No pulse, no heartbeat, two doctors at his side.
He said, you died. We found no trace of life in you. Anyway, they said, you take rest. And they went away. And then Father, he said, something he saw. He thought it was during the time when he thought he had fainted, he saw a huge golden eagle. And he was wondering, how did that huge bird come through this opening, because it was much larger than the size of the opening. And then he was floating above the gathering, and then suddenly he was back in his body. And he saw Swami waving the bird away, and the bird disappeared.
And tell us the significance of the eagle.
The eagle is supposed to come and take the soul with it.
So Baba said, not so fast.
Baba waved it away and it vanished. So then he said, then it made sense. He said, then he really saw it, and it was not a dream, he really saw it. Then in the evening, there was a trust meeting, and in the trust, Swami announced that Bose had died. He told them Bose had died, but I can't let him go as yet. He still has work to do for me. Now this is 1988.
This is 1988 in the jam-packed Purnachandra Hall on this glorious holiday with what's the capacity there? 18,000 people?
Something of that kind, 18 to 20,000 people.
20,000 people. Your mother, it's so crowded, doesn't even see that it's her husband who died.
He died and was brought back to life. Now in that trust meeting, Swami announced that Bose had died, but I can't let him go as yet. He still has work to do for me. And the work that he had to do was a super specialty hospital.
In what capacity? Was he like the superintendent?
Yes. See, now Tigrat promised Swami, give me land and I'll give you a hospital in working order. Swami gave him the land. And Tigrat engaged his Sir Professor Keith Critchlow, renowned architect, to do it.
From London.
And L&T, Larsen and Toubro were the contractors. But I believe right from the day one, there were disputes and quarrels. And by first week of May, the foundations of the main building hadn't even started. The work had started on the living accommodation, and a lot of equipment had been purchased, and that is at that stage Tigrat went to Swami, Swami, my money is all finished. What do I do? He said, money is all finished? You said, hospital in working order, where's the hospital? Swami, I was misled by this chap, I was misled by this fellow, they gave me wrong estimates. Now my money is finished, what do I do? Swami said, go home. But Swami said, no, it's my problem. You go home. Packed him off, called Father, take immediate charge. If necessary, put 2,000 people on the job.
2,000 people.
Now this is first week of May. He said, if necessary, put 2,000 people on the job. But the first heart operation will be performed on 22nd November.
1 year after the project started.
When you're
And-
an announcement.
After the announcement of the project.
And then he told father, call your younger son, he'll help you.
That was you.
No, my
Oh,
youngest
okay.
brother is an architect in Pune.
Okay.
So he was called for, he immediately came over and work started. And father couldn't care for any disputes and quarrels. He was a bulldozer and
He was a hardened professional.
bulldozer and a road roller combined. He told the L&T, you better do it the nice way, otherwise you will have to do it the hard way, but you have to do it. So you choose. And they said, oh no, it takes time for the drawings to come from Madras. What nonsense, there's a daily bus service. Give the drawing, to pay something to the driver, give the drawings to him, he'll deliver it at site. And that's what happened. That became the normal route after that. So whatever problems they came to father, found a solution. I said, no, you get to work. You can't get away.
And where did the money come from?
There were other people who donated money. People came forward. I saw one thing, in Swami's projects, funds are never the problem. It is the commitment and the will, which is necessary, and which if they are lacking, the work doesn't proceed, but it is never the funds. People came forward, funds came.
Your father must have loved Swami.
Oh yes, there was one thing about him which Swami loved very much. If Swami told him to jump in the well, he would jump in it without second thought. No, he is totally committed.
And how do you most fondly remember your father?
Well, he has always been a go-getter, a person who got things done. He always faced problems and he overcame them, he got things done. And we also took lessons from that. That when given a job, you've got to get things done. You can't sit back and say, oh, give out long sob stories, this fellow didn't happen, that didn't happen. Nothing happens according to schedule. No project goes on smoothly. There are always hiccups, there are always problems. Otherwise, there would be no need for us. You could give it to our laborers and they would do the job. But he was a great one for getting things done. And we took lessons from that. There are no sob stories. The thing is done, it's not done, no excuses.
And sometimes you'd have the helping hand of Sai Baba. The cement wouldn't be ruined by a monsoon.
That always happens. He sees commitment, he sees sincerity, and then he gives a helping hand without you realizing it. You think you've done it, but it is he who's giving the helping hand. But then he sees your reaction, he sees your help. A small anecdote about my mother. She had fallen in the room and had fractured her upper arm. Plaster was put. After 4 weeks, the plaster was removed and found that the bones hadn't joined, so they put the plaster on again for 2 more weeks. And even after the plaster was removed, she continued to have very severe pain. And this continued for 2 years. We were very concerned. How would mother pull on like this? And a lot of people said, why don't you ask Swami? Mother said, no, Swami knows everything. Why should I ask? He'll do whatever necessary at the right time. I'm not going to ask him for anything. And one Swami said, how's your hand? Is it paining? A little paining. No, beat your husband, your hand will become all right. So he smiled and mother also smiled. This went on for more than 2 years. Then one fine morning, Swami comes over and says, how's your hand, Amma? Is it paining? Yes, Swami, a little. Give your hand. he massaged her hand, the upper hand, and this part, and fingers had become bent. My wife is a physiotherapist. She tried to give treatment, didn't work, only made the pain worse. And here Swami rubs here, rubs here. Next time we come here, we find mother's hand as it was.
Does it ever make you wonder why he didn't do that earlier, sooner?
He saw how she takes it, the attitude, the faith in him. He sees all that, then he decides to intervene.
Beautiful story, beautiful. Colonel Bose, you're known far and wide as a regional authority on the life of Jesus Christ. Here in the Abode of Peace, we're close to the Hillview Stadium where there's a towering statue of Jesus. There are other statues of Jesus here and paintings, of course, even in your museum.
Museum, we have a beautiful statue of Jesus.
Even here sitting on the I noticed on the very front part of your desk is a Madonna and Child, really. So I know you were schooled in parochial schools and Catholic schools, but that doesn't normally have too many kids walk out of the school with a good feeling about Jesus necessarily rubbing off on them. Where did your interest come from?
So, the experience in the school was not very good. But what I learned about Jesus was something beautiful. And I remembered that. You know. We learned catechism, we learned the good things. And that remained. And the real study started when this book, Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown's book, came out, and there were protests all over India saying that Christians said that is all wrong, that is all myth. So it came to me that if this is wrong, then what is right? And that started me off. And the more I went into it, the more I got interested and thought it's one of the greatest men who ever walked on the surface of the earth. What Christians know about him is probably only 50%.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of scholars now believe that Jesus, Apollonius, and Avalokiteshvara. Avalokiteshvara is the foremost bodhisattva in Buddhism. Bodhisattvas are beings one step below Buddha. There have been 84 bodhisattvas, but the most important of them is Avalokiteshvara. And a lot of Western scholars believe that Jesus, Apollonius, and Avalokiteshvara were one and the same person.
And I always thought of Apollonius as almost a mythical creation, but you're suggesting that that could have been Jesus walking through the hills of what we think of as India today, but this ancient spiritual part of the world 2,000 years ago.
You see, now it is accepted that Jesus did not die on the cross. He was saved.
It's not accepted in the Christian world yet.
Christian world, yes. But even among Christians, there are a lot of people who are more open-minded. And it was Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea who planned Jesus' rescue. As far as I can see, they were also aided and abetted by Pontius Pilate himself.
So you're talking about Jesus coming to this part of the world, known as modern-day India, not during his wandering boyhood years, but after the supposed... Twice. Okay.
For the 13 missing years in his life, he was in India. You know, Janet and Richard Bach, they have made a film on this, and there are a lot of books on this. The 13 years, and Swami has also said this. Jesus came to India, he came from the western side, spent some time with the Jains in Ujjain, learned about Jainism, came to Puri, from Puri he was preaching to everybody, and the Brahmins didn't like it. He said only the Brahmins were permitted to learn about spirituality and not the Shudras and others. Jesus said all are same to me. They didn't like that, and there was a conspiracy to assassinate him, but Jesus was informed and he went to Varanasi. There he spent time and learnt about Hinduism and more Hinduism, because Puri was not a seat of learning at that time. Banaras was the actual seat of learning. And from Banaras, he went over to Rajgir, and that is where he came in contact with Buddhism. And then he went to Tibet, Lhasa, Leh, and from there to the monastery at Himis, where later on the Russian traveler Notovich reached, and he was told about, oh, Jesus came here, and they showed him scrolls, were given the whole story of Jesus, how he came, how he was later on crucified by his own people. Notovich was the person who came and then announced it to the world.
Jyoti and I have read accounts that go along these lines. To the average, to the majority of Christians, this is not only radical news, it's unheard of news, but it's of great interest. Where would people go to find more information about this storyline that you're weaving that's a phenomenal story?
Well, there are so many books. There are so many books. People have written so much about it.
And you've studied these, and you've talked to Christians who believe in these storylines.
I read about them. Instead of talking to them, you need somebody who's very well versed to talk to, and I couldn't get anybody who could give details in person. But there were a lot of people who have written books, different people, scholars who have spent their whole life on researching and finding out the historical Jesus and not the myth.
And hasn't Baba himself shown some light on some of the aspects of these
Baba
stories?
said that Jesus, after his crucifixion, he didn't die. He came back to India, and he lived here up to the age of 120. And when he died, he was buried in a place which is now known as the Rosabal Mosque in Srinagar, in the cavity vault below the...
It's a very nondescript area. We've actually seen photographs of it from
Rosabal Mosque.
Yeah.
Yes. Now the question that arises is, if Jesus, by the time he came here, it was 54 AD, so he was about 60 years old, and he lived here for another 60 years, and he preached. Wherever he went, he preached. So how is it that there is nothing known about Jesus' preaching after he came to India?
Right.
What scholars feel is, at the time when Jesus came to Kashmir, Kashmir was the center of Buddhism. And the second council of Buddhism was held at a place called Haran at about those times. And Jesus played an important part in organizing that. And after that, the Buddhism, the emphasis shifted from the Hinayana Buddhism to Mahayana Buddhism. That is, from the Hinayana Buddhism talked about self-liberation. But the Mahayana Buddhism was mass upliftment, and that is what Jesus stood for. He never bothered about his own liberation or upliftment. It was always the mass.
And probably the last thing he had on his mind was the formation of a religion in his name, Christianity.
Well, he never started, none of these ever started out to create a religion. Their followers gave the name. So Christianity or Buddhism was named by the followers. And Christianity, the way it has been projected today, should be called Polynity and not Christianity.
Yes.
Kumar Bose, you said that ancient scrolls told about Jesus in India during his missing 12 or 13 years.
Yes.
Are there ancient scrolls telling about after his crucifixion in India?
No. After that it is not known. Because after his crucifixion, what happened, that is not known. The story stops at the crucifixion. What was there in the scrolls at Hebes. And there have been other travelers who have seen the scrolls. But the story stops at the crucifixion. What happened after that is not known. What is believed that Jesus, after Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea got him down from the cross and they revived him. Then as he came out of that so-called tomb, which was constructed by Joseph of Arimathea as his family tomb, it had been constructed only to save Jesus. Nobody had ever been buried there. And it had been completed just a very short while before the crucifixion took place. So all this was a put up job to save Jesus. And the Essenes, who were the therapeutics, they knew therapeutics, that is reviving the bodies, therapists. They're part of the Essenes. So they were there to take care of Jesus. Nicodemus had already got aloe and so many other herbs to cover him up with. And when Jesus came out, Mary Magdalene had come there and she took him to be a gardener. And he said, "Have you seen Jesus?" And then he revealed his identity. "Don't you recognize me?" His face was already swollen, but then Mary Magdalene did recognize him at that time.
And the information you have about Jesus living to 120 years is from the information we have thereafter is from Baba.
Yes,
what
Baba.
you're saying. Okay.
Baba said he lived up to the age of 120. And
in India?
Yes, India.
Ah.
So he came here in 1960 AD, which when he was already 54 AD, when he was 60 years old. Because he was born, if you go by this, it was 6 BC. His birth was kept hidden. Now, after he came, he was revived and he spent some time in hiding. Then when he started moving eastwards, I think that is the time a lot of Western scholars feel that he took this identity of Apollonius to escape being caught by the Romans again.
So it's a false identity.
Also my friend, this is an American author, he wrote Apollonius, Chuck
DeFazio. I read that book. It was very interesting. He says that's a fictional account. Of course it's a fictional account.
So he doesn't agree that Jesus and Apollonius were the same person. Okay. But you see, it's too much of a coincidence. Similar characteristics, similar actions, similar attitude,
timing,
same at the same time. It's too much of a coincidence. And then you come to India and then you come across Avalokiteshvara. Again, same characteristic, everything similar. Now 3 people, more or less at the same time, same characteristics, is too much of a coincidence.
What I'm curious about
This is your theory? Okay.
I'm curious about his followers.
But Chuck DeFazio says one thing. He says Jesus, that you know, the world knows him as Jesus, but here he is known as Avalokiteshvara.
Yeah.
That Chuck says in his book, Apollonius.
I'm sure we'll hear from Chuck about this.
I spoke to him. He's forgotten where he got the source.
But what about the followers, the apostles of Jesus? You would think that as the New Testament was set to be written, much of it passed down word of mouth over a couple of hundred years, that these accounts would have been included somehow. I mean, isn't it widely believed, at least here in India, even by the Catholic Church, that one of his great apostles, St. Thomas, was executed and buried here after living here in India as well. Could there have been a connection? And I'm amazed that this storyline has not surfaced sooner.
You see, some people they cling on to a belief. If you have an open mind, then you can read but if you don't have an open mind and then you are dogmatic about certain things, then you can't proceed anything beyond that.
Can we read about Avalokiteshvara?
Avalokiteshvara.
Avalokiteshvara.
You know, there's a very interesting book by Jesus Lived in India. Holger Kirsten, a German,
we've seen that book.
A German clergyman. A very interesting book. There he says that he is known as Avalokiteshvara here. Because now, they see how the shift takes place from Hinayana Buddhism to Mahayana Buddhism. And it was Jesus who was organizing that Buddhist council. And then, as far as Kashmir and India is concerned, Jesus disappears and Avalokiteshvara comes up, literally from nowhere, and with exactly the same characteristics as Jesus. Ocean of mercy and compassion. It's too much of a coincidence, you know.
Does Swami tell us anything about Jesus' mother Mary?
No, he didn't say anything.
But if he had progeny?
That part, some people have written about it, but Swami hadn't said anything, and I haven't read much on that point. But when he left the Roman Empire, two Marys followed him. One, of course, was his mother. The other is regarded to be Mary Magdalene, whom he had married. And in his travels, what is today Pakistan, there is a place called Murree, which is probably named after Mary. And there is a tomb, there's a photograph of a tomb where it is written, "My Murree the Asthan, final resting place of Mother Mary."
Well, you know this news.
And then along the Silk Route, there's a place called Kashgar.
Kashgar?
It is along the Silk Route.
Yes.
From Kashgar, there is a route which comes south to India. Now, about 10 miles from Kashgar, there is the tomb of another Mary, probably Mary Magdalene.
You're a Hindu. You've given us a little bit of an overview of your interest in Jesus, but why such detailed investigation on your part and ability to recall these details?
You know, the more I read about Jesus, the more interested I became. And all right, yes, I'm by birth Hindu, but we were always taught right from our school days. I attended a public school called Sindhya School in Gwalior. We were taught to have respect for all religions. And then when we came in contact with Swami, that's what he said. There are various routes to the mountain top, but the view from there is the same.
He seems to have placed so much significance on Christmas, on the Christians' calendar, December 25th. Any idea why, of all the religious and spiritual holy days and holidays on all the calendars of all the religions, Sai Baba would put up on such a high altar the celebration of Christ's birth here in Prashanti Nilayam?
I don't know. He hasn't ever said about it. Now this 25th December again, in 325 AD, Emperor Constantine found that the Western Roman Empire was tottering, and something had to be done to save the Roman Empire from total collapse. The Christians had become quite popular, and one move was to remove the Christians from the government service. And the government service virtually collapsed because the Christians were the only ones who could read and write. And so instead of being sentimental, he looked around and found that Christianity had become very popular, and he tried to analyze why. First was, the Christians were, to a large extent, they were literate. They were taught to read and write so that they could read the Bible. Second was, only a Christian could look forward to a decent burial. The others, the way they disposed of their dead bodies were very, very bad. But the Christians ensured that a Christian was given a burial, a decent burial. Number two. Third, medical care. They tried to improve the health of the Christians. As a result, the mortality in Christians came down, the mortality in other sects went up, and 2 or 3 generations' time, the number of Christians, the proportion of Christians increased. The fourth thing was that they took care of young widows and people, women without any support, and saw to it that they got some means of support, and they were not forced into prostitution, which was happening. So it is these things which made Christianity very popular. And when the Emperor Constantine saw that, very shrewd, he gave full support to Christianity. He made it a state religion.
And probably created the significant date of the birth of Christ.
The side problem was that the Christianity became state religion, but that part of Christianity which was in power at that time. All other gospels where it was an offense to keep any other gospels other than the 4. They would be punishable by death, so everything was burned and removed. Now throughout this the history of Christianity, whoever in all this, there is a winner and a loser. The winner becomes the Orthodox Church, the loser becomes a heretic and is thrown out. And then the scene changes and the heretics become the Orthodox and the Orthodox become heretics. And this has happened a number of times. So whoever became, at that point of time when Emperor Constantine saved the Roman Empire from collapse, whoever were the people who were in power, the part of Christianity, who believed in these 4 Gospels of Christianity, they flourished. But it saved the Roman Empire. And in fact, later on when the Roman Empire collapsed finally, people became even more interested in Christianity because this was the only stable organization in the whole empire
that survived.
So it is at that point of time that Christianity really became a world religion.
Do you think it was perhaps at that point in time that Christianity became appealing to people other than the Jews who had followed Jesus?
You see, Jews, that part had been taken over long back. When Paul was alive, there was a big controversy, because at that time you had to become a Jew to become a Christian.
Yes.
And Paul is the one who, on behalf of the Gentiles, went to James, Jesus' brother, who was the priest of the church for 30 years. Jesus only 3 years, James for 30 years. And James agreed. The focal point was circumcision. And Jesus had said, if that was the way man had to be, then you would have born in that way. And James said, it is not necessary to do that to become Christians. So in one stroke, everybody could become a Christian without having to become a Jew first. And that is a big thing which Paul did.
Did Sai Baba have any conversations with you about your encyclopedic understanding of Christian heritage?
I just wrote to him, when I had written about 30 pages, I sent it to him, Swami, I am doing this. If you approve, it is about 64 pages.
And you sent us this document, the same document that you sent to Sai Baba?
No, about half this size.
About half this size. And did Baba respond?
No, he didn't say anything. But I found many people are coming across books, and people tell me about some books about Jesus. So whenever I felt that I have no more information which I could gather, something else would come up.
In the closing minutes, Colonel Bose, just some recollections, maybe some conversations or meetings or whatever impressions that seem to come to your mind the quickest between you and Sai Baba over the many years you've been here with Sai Baba.
Mainly about Chaitanya Jyoti.
The wonderful museum in which we're sitting in your office right now. And how's the museum coming along?
Well, it's still doing well. See, now, especially after Swami's departure, this is the only place where you can learn about Swami. You can't see him in his physical form, but this is the only place where you can learn about Swami. So it has become a place of pilgrimage by itself.
I'm sure you get visitors from around the world who come here.
Yes, so that's true. We get visitors from all around the world.
And do you still make contributions to it? Do you still add to it, or is it?
We keep refining, we keep improving, but there is not much space for expansion at the moment.
One of the nicest memories I have ever had of Prashanti Nilayam, and especially of this museum, was several years ago when I rapped on your door and you gave permission for Father Charles Ogata, an African Catholic priest from Nigeria, to celebrate Christmas Mass in your large auditorium that drew Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Protestants, probably people of all religions from such a large Christmas time crowd, to celebrate the Holy Mass of Christmas here. And it seems so fitting to have such unity on display, unity of faith, here in the abode of unity of faith.
Well, I forgot to mention one thing I left out, that this 25th December.
Yeah.
Now, Emperor Constantine was a sun worshipper. And when he made Christianity the state religion, he changed the day of rest from Saturday to Sunday.
I didn't know that. That's how that came about.
And the sun's day, which you celebrate for sun worshippers, the day that they worshipped, the sun's worship, was 25th December. So that became Christ's birthday.
Very pragmatic on his part. And look what's happened. 2,000 years later, it's still being celebrated on that day.
And that is why I was telling you how, when everything else collapsed, Christianity was the only stable institution all over Europe. And then from Europe it went to North America, South America, and other places.
I end by asking you the same question I ask everybody, but with a slight variation. I always say, please tell me in your own words, who is Sai Baba? But it seems to me you're already painting a pretty vivid expression of Sai Baba in your characterization of the life of Jesus, the long life of Jesus.
See, again, Swami stood for compassion and mercy. Ocean of compassion, we always say. Ocean of compassion. And this is what God is all about. And this term God-fearing, which the Christians brought in, was a very negative thing. God is not to be feared, God is to be loved.
Yeah. Colonel Bose, may we return again sometime?
Oh, my pleasure.
Do some more studying up so we can pick your mind, okay? Thank you. Sai Ram. Sai Ram. We have people
He's giving sometimes too. So many, last time